What's going out there, YouTube? This is SEL0320 representing JVS. So I am very excited to discuss something that's literally been on my heart for months. I've been waiting to try to make this video, and now come Monday, for a select few of us, or many of us, we're going to actually be able to go to the fan screening of Justice League on November the 13th. So hopefully you guys can hear me pretty well. I've got a dishwasher in the background. I've got the camera in a really interesting position. But as you can see all around me, I've got nothing but DCU, DC branded things everywhere. And so what I'm going to be talking about, like this, the title is going to be described, and this is the first time I really named the title before I made a video, because I've had all these different things I wanted to pick apart when it comes to the Justice League. And this is labeled hashtag Justice League All In. The things that it has going for it and things that are going against it. The reality is that the Justice League, for most of us, is something that we never even thought or imagined or dreamed was even going to be something that was going to happen. You know, I think that when Man of Steel came out, no, even before that, when I Am Legend, you know, showed this random poster that had, you know, a Batman and Superman logo together. I think that was like maybe around 2007, 2008. And it was like, wow, a movie that actually has Batman and Superman. A lot of us, you know, grew up remembering the Michael Keatons, you know, the Val Kilmers. I think the later generation, the millennial age, you know, knows like Christian Bale. But for me, Michael Keaton's, you know, 1989 Batman was my favorite because that was my first, you know. And then for everybody else, the Christopher Reeves was amazing. And even, you know, what they've been able to do with incarnations over the years with Tom Welling, Dean Cain, Brandon Routh, it's been amazing. But it was like, the thought of these two characters together was something I never dreamed or imagined. And that broadened that spectrum in, you know, BVS and Man of Steel, that, okay, Superman exists in a world with Batman, with Lex Luthor, so that means that the prospect of metahumans or other people with abilities is something that can happen. Now, even there was a moment in Man of Steel when Superman, you know, tried to stop this tanker from getting exploded, and he was in the water, and you sit there and see these two whales going past. I was like, is Aquaman going to show up? Like, those are things that resonated in my heart as a fan of comic book lore. Kind of like even with, you know, the Avengers. When I looked at the Ultimate Avengers movie, that was when I was like, why don't they make this into a movie? And then by the time, you know, the MCU came up with Iron Man, Thor, and it just went and, you know, for the good or the bad, the first phase, it set up this interesting moment in movie history that was the Avengers. It's not something that I can sit there and watch every day, but I got to give credit when credit's due. Like, that build-up. And then, like, when I thought about the cartoon, I thought about, like, all these characters together. It's the same exact feeling of euphoria that I'm feeling with the Justice League. But what we're going to do is we're going to break down the things that, you know, Justice League has going for it and things that it has going against it. And it's going to be really hard to go against the grain, personally, because people are going to go and say, well, you're going off this bias. If you looked at my movie collection, you would see a huge plethora of Fox stuff, you know, Marvel stuff, DC stuff. Heck, people thinking that this is a Zoom hat. It's not. This is a Power Rangers hat. Like, I love, you know, expression of what, you know, sci-fi and comic genre, and even just a thrilling, you know, film. Like, I can look at, you know, Terminator Judgment right now. I can look at the movie Con Air right now. I can look at Batman '89 right now. I can look at, you know, the Richard Donner cut with Superman right now. And at the same exact time, anything that the MCU has kind of put out, I've enjoyed. I even looked at the Thor Ragnarok, and I'm going to play an interesting part into my discussion with that, because as just yesterday, actually, I think it was the 10th yesterday, or was it 11th? I can't really remember. But on Veterans Day, they actually released out, you know, the first reactions to the movie. So I'm not even going to tackle that just now, so just bear with me. I'm going to try to take everything that I perceived, everything that I've watched, from the culmination of, you know, this movie even being a possibility to even my thoughts even long before, okay? So, first off, for me, for Justice League to succeed, it's got to be a good word of mouth. With Man of Steel, you know, when, you know, they tied in and did, you know, the Dark Knight Dark Knight Rises, in between that time frame, they had talked about Christopher Nolan trying to tackle his own universe. And that is where the inception of The Man of Steel actually came about. A lot of people don't know that Christopher Nolan tied together with Zack Snyder, but he didn't want, you know, to be the spearheader of a universe. And eventually what ended up happening was they made Man of Steel, and a lot of people were very divisive about their thought process of it. Ironically for me, that was one of the first movies that I really dissected and delved deep into in discussion. And I actually did like a whole live commentary of the whole entire film, which you'll be able to check that out sometime today or tomorrow or Sunday. But when I actually remember it, you know, and people were loving it, you know, and some people were like, this is not my Superman, that is when things started to change in the perception of how people talked about this coming up DCU film universe. Because, you know, a lot of people set the bar that The Dark Knight, that is the bar, you know, and to be quite honest with you, that's something that is impractical to actually reach, because it merged reality with a slight bit of comic fantasy. A slight bit. But nothing in any of the Christopher Nolan movies, aside from Bane like punching this huge pillar and it kind of breaking apart, was in the realm of possibility. Everything that was in those movies could definitely happen. But when you have something like Superman, which is an impractical being, which is coming from somewhere outer space, then you're going to get that divide instantaneously. And unfortunately what happened was people started to compare the Richard Donner stuff and everything that came before to this is not my Superman. And so the word of mouth really hurt critically the Man of Steel film. Whereas a lot of people really loved the story, a lot of people really appreciated it, a lot of people appreciated, you know, the delving in deeper to what the Krypton lore was, as much as the expression of a world that exists with Superman and the possibility of Batman and other heroes. So the word of mouth of that already started things. But even before that, in the middle of Dark Knight Rises getting, you know, partial good claims, some people didn't like it, some people did. There was a thing called The Green Lantern that came out, and that got crucified. That movie, I buy a lot of films, but I turned down buying that movie for $3. Like, you know, it's sad because Ryan Reynolds actually could have been an interestingly good Hal Jordan, but the positioning of what they did with him and where they orchestrated that whole entire film messed up everything. So, in the inception of this, even though they had Christopher Nolan, even though they had a visionary and visual person in Zack Snyder, much like even with this one is going to be, which I'll talk to you about what happens in around May time, you know, the word of mouth was not what it needed to be. And that is something that could and might be a detractant based on the reactions already for Batman vs. Superman. Not just that, we grew up in the age of people that they don't like to just guess or have their open-ended opinion about, all right, I'm going to see this movie, I might like it, I might not. No, I'd rather look at Rotten Tomatoes, I'd rather look at Metacritic, I'd rather look at my, you know, my reviewers, and they allow that to be the gospel in terms of their perception. That's why I'm talking about word of mouth is really key with Justice League. And the word of mouth, honestly, since the next movie I'm about to talk about, BVS, has been terrible. Honestly, BVS, even though it came out in 2015, or 16. I think it was supposed to come out in 2015, you know, coming out in 2016. Anyway, ever since that movie, they have not stopped ridiculing not only Zack Snyder, but even the merits of the DCU franchise. Like, where people were kind of like on the fence, like, okay, Man of Steel could be good, maybe over time, rewatchable. With BBS, it was like unanimous no. Like, Batman killed, you know, Superman let people die again. He was a dreary Superman. He was a war-ridden Superman. You know, he wasn't invincible. And I think I actually had an interesting commentary about, you know, the Man of Steel franchise, in that when we were talking about it, I was like, this Superman is very much so physically vulnerable and emotionally vulnerable, in the sense that you have two people that pour into your life, two dads, you know, that position you on this path, but you question yourself and the merits of all of it because you don't know if you can live up to it, you know? And then on top of that, physically, like when I look at even the Superman Returns, like when Brandon Routh's character was getting hit with stuff, he wasn't flinching. But this Man of Steel, like, he was getting hit with like heavy rounded stuff and people that were fighting him, and like he was getting hurt, you know? He's very much so physically vulnerable and emotionally vulnerable. And I actually thought that was captivating because going into BVS, you know, now he's like, you know, everybody blames me for what happened, and I've chosen to continue to move. But everything I do now, it just platforms into negativity. On top of the whole Batman thing, that people were just like, you know, Ben Affleck is a great Batman, but he killed a lot of people, even though, you know, the 1989 Batman killed some people as well. Even the 1992 Batman Returns killed a lot of people. That's just happened for years, you know, but I think that people get jaded when it comes to those two types of things, but that's not the position. I'm just talking to you about the merits that ever since BVS, and I think the worst thing that BVS did was the movie trailer, the third movie trailer that showed Doomsday in it. It revealed the surprise. Whereas I'll say as a pro for Justice League, they've not revealed how Superman comes back to life. We know he's going to come back. You know, you can't have a Justice League without him. As well as there's been talks about, you know, Lex Luthor, there's talks about Green Lantern. Of course, Darkseid is in the inner sanctum of this whole entire villain part of all this. But they haven't really revealed that in any trailer. So that's a positive, you know, towards, you know, people's perception of Justice League, because it hasn't revealed as much. But with BVS, so much got revealed and so many people came on to this rail of hate and comparison that it's become malicious at this point, unfortunately. And so that's one of the things I feel like is hurting, you know, Justice League, that they already feel as though this is something that will fail. Then you come to Wonder Woman, who was the hidden gem, which I intentionally skipped Suicide Squad because I got my own problems with Suicide Squad. I feel that Suicide Squad should have been a rated R film that they cut up and messed up, and they put, you know, David Ayer in a situation, you know, he just took the brunt of it. You know, he's like, this is my film, I failed at it, but I feel like, just like with Justice League, they've confirmed, you know, the CEO was like, this has to be a 2-hour long movie, which his perspective on what it should be versus the movie working as a whole should have been, you know, more leaned towards that. But that's for another thing. So they've done this before. They're doing it with Justice League. That is a detracting or a negative possibly going into the movie. That's something that could hurt it, in other words. But with this hidden gem, Wonder Woman, people were like, Gal Gadot? No, this is the chick, what was her name? I forget her name in the Fast and Furious franchise, but she was like, she looks skinny. They were talking about her body. They were talking about her ethnicity. They were talking about her lineage. They were just trying to crucify this girl, you know? And then when Wonder Woman came out, it was like people rallied behind it. It was like, this is the first real inspirational female-led superhero film. And it succeeded in every aspect. Like, they were like, this is the gospel. When personally, I felt like that same way with Man of Steel. I felt like this is what I wanted always in the comic book form of, you know, a Superman film. But with this, it actually succeeded because it had not only the background buzz that was like, okay, this is gonna be good, this is so amazing. Like, everybody rallied behind it, and I wish that was something that could happen with Justice League, but unfortunately that's not the reality right now. So then let's go into the PR. So I talked a little bit about, you know, what they didn't do with Justice League that they did do with BVS, and even Wonder Woman. Like, Wonder Woman, they did not really show until, I want to say, after the movie came out, like this TV spot that had Ares, which was the villain in it. But even then, they didn't show like the moments that mattered. The moments that mattered to me were her and Steve Trevor, and even with her exploration that she is a god. You know, even though it was kind of expressed, they didn't really dive deep into the trailers, which I appreciated, and that was a good PR move. And I think that the PR move for Justice League has actually been pretty good. I personally think that they've done a good job of keeping things to the cut. If there is a Green Lantern, they have not shown any indication of it. If there's a Martian Manhunter, if there's a Iris West, if there's a Lex Luthor, if there's a Darkseid, if those things were in there or if they weren't, you know, only thing that I know did get spoiled, and this is probably Ben's fault, they showed like a clip supposedly of the Batman film that they were filming, but I know that movie wasn't even being filmed, so that footage had to have come from Justice League, and it was of Slade Wilson or Deathstroke. So that's the only thing to me that got kind of spoiled, because it layered an expectation of what things could, and that got pushed all over the internet. And I think I even did a video on it as soon as it kind of came out, in the middle of everything. The next thing I would say is the runtime. I talked to you about how the CEO made it so that, you know, Justice League had to be 2 hours. One of the things in the reaction that they've kind of said or perpetuated is that the story arc is thin. They don't service the villain well or the purpose of the story arc because they try to get everything to focus in on the heroes, which is not bad. I think even John Campea said something, the allusion of that it's more important that the heroes work so that they can platform everything else as far as the universe. But for me, if the heroes work and you can be able to get a villain or a leading up to a certain kind of villain story arc, I think that's more important. And I think that the reality is a lot of people, like the 2 or 3 weeks ago, maybe almost close to a month ago now, when they heard about what the runtime was, oh my gosh, they were all over Twitter. They were like, some people said the movie was supposed to have been 2 hours and 50 minutes long. Some people said the movie was going to be, 2 hours and 30 minutes long. And what it ended up being was an hour and 19 minutes, is like a minute less than 2 hours. It does kind of seem like something was going on there, unfortunately. So, the reality is that was something that was a detractor, and might still be a detractor for people going into it, because their realization is like, man, how are you supposed to set up a good story and keep momentum of how the characters fundamentally work? And based on the reactions, it's showing that the characters work, but there's something going on with the story. And I think that had a lot to do with people's assumption going into the runtime, and then when they get in it, it's like, see, this is what didn't work. But unfortunately, you have to watch the movie without being consumed with all the atmospherics. But the atmospherics are there. There's no way you can kind of avoid those atmospherics. You can try to avoid them, but you really can't. You really can't do an ultimate blackout, because this movie and BVS have been on a railroad. And that's one of the things I was going to talk about next is Twitter. Dude, Twitter, if you go in and type in Twitter Justice League screening or Justice League embargo or Justice League review, dude, they will go in. There's so many. And I think that this will lead into an interesting segue, but there are so many people that fear, and fear is a big thing when I'm talking about with Twitter, that this will fail. Or even if they don't fear it, they're like, it's going to fail. Or they're like comparing it to Marvel, like, this is not going to be better than this. And if you already put that in your head and submitted that there, how can you really ultimately enjoy it and come up with your own observational opinion about the film? You just can't. You just can't. And it's almost like, even if you're a fan, you're like, man, I got all these people telling me that I'm stupid for looking at this movie or wanting to look at this movie. Why and how could you enjoy it? Because you're already kind of like with this face of defeat. And then you become what I call defensive, in the sense that somebody makes a statement about, comparing it to this or comparing it to that. And you're like, well, the Marvel movies do that, or the Marvel movies do this. And that's where I'm going to segue into Thor Ragnarok. But I'm going to stop talking because I think my battery's low. In the sense of me segueing into Thor Ragnarok, a lot of people were kind of just like, before I even decided to look at that movie, they were like, this is going to be a comedy. This is not going to be something that's going to take itself seriously. This is going to be a visual spectacle. It's going to be a lot of fun. And so it was like, when I got to the movie theater, I wasn't really pressed to see the Thor movie, because the first Thor movie, I actually appreciated that they actually went for it from, the Jack Kirby kind of sense, but keeping like a serious tone. I feel like what they messed up was when it came to the Earth stuff. But, keeping the vigor of who Thor was, minus him not having his helmet the whole time, I enjoyed, for the most part, the first one. It was the second one that I was like, So when, I was thinking about the third one, and they saying, like, we're going to switch everything. Only thing that enticed me about this film, before I watched it, was Cate Blanchett, 1, Tessa Thompson as Valkyrie, 2, Loki, of course, being back, and the fact that they would have the gall to make this commit to the comedy. Kind of like what Guardians of the Galaxy 1 did, not necessarily 2. I'll get to that in a whole other day, but I got to the movie, and I enjoyed it. Like, I legit had a fun time with Thor Ragnarok, where I never thought I would. I didn't think I would have a fun time with it. The thing that Thor Ragnarok did for me that I enjoyed is it kept to a certain pace. Like, there was never a point that things weren't happening. But, if you went into the movie thinking, okay, this is gonna be like something that's gonna be dark, this is Ragnarok, this is gonna be this, then you probably were disappointed. I had the blessing, I guess, of like going into it with an open mind, knowing that this is gonna be something that's comedic, but having moments of levity, like the moments with, you know, Thor and his dad and Loki. I thought that was an amazing moment. The moment when, you know, Valkyrie came onto the scene, you realize how messed up she is, or that amazing cinematic moment where it showed with her. But did they go into like this, you know, Academy Award winning kind of like dialogue and story? No, they committed to what they had. Like there were moments where, you know, the executioner and Hela were having this random dialogue. Like, what kind of man are you? Or, you know, what kind of things are you going to do? Or like Loki and Thor, and like, all right, we're going to play that game like Thor. Loki's like, no, I don't want to do it. And he just throws his brother into some people. That has nothing to do with story progression, but it adds to comedic levity. And one thing that they said already with Justice League is they're trying to make this a lighter film. They're trying to make this something that commits to the characters as much as, you know, the progression of who and what they're trying to do or what they're trying to lead into. And I think with Man of Steel, like, it was an origin story. It was something to lead us into something. Who Superman's gonna be when he returns. What he really means. What he means to these people. And so, for me, like, I can compare, you know, Thor and Justice League in a positive way, because I knew that both of these movies are trying to commit to something light without trying to make them more of a serious kind of fleshed out story. And so what's happening is on Twitter, from a reactional standpoint, people are saying, you know, the story is really thin. But I kind of knew that going into it. I knew that a lot of the, and that'll be the next segue, is the reshoots, had a lot to do with that. And some people are going to see that as a negative, and I'll talk about that in a second. But for me, like, Thor wasn't about, like, you know, the epic story. It was about these interesting characters and how they facilitated in this world and how funny and entertainingly fun they were. And because of that, they got like a 93, you know, Rotten Tomatoes score. And I think I'll probably touch on the Rotten Tomato thing first before I segue into the reshoots, which is, to me, the Rotten Tomatoes are a negative, not just for the DC comics, but they're a negative for the Marvel comics, because what's happening is there's an algorithm for the Rotten Tomatoes where even if a person says a movie is 4 out of 5 stars, and they're like, all right, you get like an immediate, like, positive rating on that. But if you say the movie is a 2.5 and you say it was all right, you could get either fresh or rotten. So if you look at Metacritic versus looking at, you know, Rotten Tomatoes, there are people that'll be like, all right, Thor Ragnarok was a 71% Metacritic rate. That means that most people average it between really a C+ and a B than, you know, the ratio that Rotten Tomatoes showed for an A. And the difference is Rotten Tomatoes is like, is the movie good versus is the movie, how do we break it down from a critic standpoint? That's the thing that a lot of people, their ratio is messing up, because when you look at BVS, like, critics are like, it's a divisive mess, so they would probably rate it between a C- to a C+, or maybe a D, you know, and that's where you get, you know, what you get from Metacritic. But then with Rotten Tomatoes, if they even said like anything negative, the ratio is going to immediately drop. And so unfortunately with the Marvel films, like, they've been good films. They've been something that everybody, that they can appreciate and crowd pleasing, but they're not like, if you try to compare Thor Ragnarok with, you know, Blade Runner 2049 or Thor Ragnarok, you know, with Logan, it's going to be night and day from a critical perspective. And I think that now with Rotten Tomatoes, that's what everybody looks to get their comprehension. All right, this is what we'll call a good movie based on that. And I think that that's a negative trending. Like, Rotten Tomatoes shouldn't dictate what you watch and what you shouldn't watch. But it is, because it's an easy thing, unlike, you know, the newspaper days back in the day where, you know, Ebert and Robert, you know, Variety magazine or Times magazine that wrote these reviews one way or another. Like, now you can get this quick fix, look on this app, like, oh, this movie's some trash, I'm not watching it. And that's what happened, unfortunately, with BVS. And unfortunately, what happened with Wonder Woman and all the Marvel, the Fox, and other superhero-related movies is that people in their perception go and look at that as being the gospel, and it shouldn't be. It really shouldn't be. But the problem is that this is going to be something that's going to make or break Justice League. Factual. If, which the embargo lifts on the 15th, if Justice League has maybe, like, let's say Justice League gets an 80% Rotten Tomatoes score, this movie will make $1 billion. Guaranteed. No matter what. Even if people right now go and just blast the movie, you know, and they're just like, this is garbage. If on that day it maintains an 80% ratio, this movie will make $1 billion. What will probably happen, based on what I've seen from the reactions, is going to be an even B to C to D ratio. It's not going to be an F. No, there's not going to be anybody that's going to be like, this is a terrible movie. I don't think. But I think that based on that, it could range between 50 to 80. It's not going to be, unfortunately, it's not going to be a 90 or 100% rating because there's so much in the line that this should fail. And there's already so much animosity back and forth from comparing it to something else or comparing it to something previous that is not attainable, such as like the Nolan franchise, even though Nolan did have a hand in not just Justice League, but also Man of Steel. So that's one thing. But the Rotten Tomatoes is something that will make or break Justice League. I can guarantee it. No matter what. No matter what you say to me, if you say, you know, Justice League might get like a 70, percent or 69% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, and that's still fresh. But it's nothing like having a freshly certified film. I legit, when I was watching the reviews, waiting for the embargo to lift for Wonder Woman, I was like, give us a fresh. Give us a fresh. And we got a fresh. And I was like, yes, but I shouldn't even have had that. Like, even my wife, when we go and look at something on Xfinity, on demand, she's literally looking like, oh, is this fresh? I was like, honey, don't look at that. But it's unavoidable. It's unavoidable. So, another thing that has laid animosity and a lot of fear has been the reshoots. I've already expressed to you the why. You know, people thinking that, you got Zack Snyder's vision, and then it just got undermined or got cut out, kind of Suicide Squad style, BVS style. BVS is definitely a good example of that because the director's cut did lay the foundations a lot easier narratively. And I perceive that most of these movies are around 2.5 hours, minus Guardians of the Galaxy 1, superhero movies I'm talking about, not just DCEU movies. And so it is to be thought, that these reshoots were meant to cut the movie down. They brought Joss Whedon in. A lot of people are like, yes, it's going to make it a great movie. But really it was to try to make the narrative flow and the dialogue progressively work better. When I did look at the recent trailers, I can see scenes that are different. I can sit there and watch, Ben Affleck in this one scene. I'm like, okay, they definitely changed this. I can tell even in the trailers personally. So it's like people are like, man, what did these reshoots do? What did they, this is a make or break thing because it's not just people are talking about it now. People have been talking about it for months. And unfortunately what happened in May, Zack Snyder revealed to the world, that his child committed suicide. And like he had decided for months to stay on Justice League, but he just could not do it anymore. He had to get back to his family. And a lot of people, bad PR and bad form on Twitter, negatively said, oh, well, Warner Bros. Just told him he had to leave. And this is better. They're bringing in jobs with no regard to human decency of what this man probably had to go through, even trying to maintain making something like this. So it's like, when you think about the positive negative side of that, the negative side is like, man, like he probably did have his vision. They cropped it and CEO made it 2 hours. But the positive side of this is like he did the right thing. And now you got somebody in Joss Whedon and Zack Snyder that are fusing what they know and what they perceive on a visionary film style to make this the best movie they can. optimism goes a long way when it comes to thinking about and processing these reshoots. But people automatically went to the negative. They either went to the terrible, like, okay, Joss Whedon's making this movie better, to, you know, now CEO and Warner Brothers cut, you know, Zack Snyder in half and put this dude in. And neither one of those are conducive of a good product. It's not merited for something that you're going to enjoy. Like, we didn't know, you know, when the Richard Donner, and even like the Batman 1989, a lot of people don't know this story. The Batman 1989, nobody thought that Michael Keaton could play Batman. They ridiculed the crap out of him, but they had no idea, you know, what Tim Burton was doing in his process of everything with Warner Bros. We will never know that. So it's like now with the age that we have, we got all this access to stuff and previews that I appreciate Star Wars and Disney and Lucasfilm being able to hide so much that the PR system, unfortunately, for Warner Brothers, what's happening is, and I didn't talk about this in the PR section, but this is a huge detractor. When, like, you know, Ben Affleck was talking about he's no longer going to be the director for the Batman film, or, you know, he was like, I'm going to be on the outs, or they were talking about Zack Snyder, or they were talking about, you know, the change in the runtime. The PR team didn't go and be like, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is what's happening with this actor. This actor has no comment, but this does not demean or diminish his role and his commitment to this movie. They make no kind of guided things that happen like that. As soon as the Coen brothers, you know, exited the Han Solo film, Disney was like, this is what's in place, this is what we've got, and that's it. And it was done in days. In Warner Brothers, like, there's not been that consistency of like, this is what's happening, and this is what we're gonna do. Like, and so what happens is you got all these different sites that I used to really love, and sites that I kind of still do love, people that I love, people that I still kind of, you know, just like, YouTube or blog posts or not, that will jump at these negative perspective things in headlines and just run with it, because negativity sells way more than positivity. Like, I'm not going to go into the specifics of that, but I've gone through countless different scenarios that's happened with just the DCU that it's like a headline. It's like here, every single day. You can't, I don't even know how some people are able to really root for I almost said JVS, root for Justice League, you know, adequately. Because every day you're getting nothing but the negativity on DCU. And it's like, the problem is, if I say, you know, or I take myself as a DC fan, and I'm like, y'all at Marvel are not getting this ridicule. That's not a jaded, you know, counteracted parallel. That's a reality. I don't know any Marvel movie that has gotten the negative press that any of these 4, now 5 DC movies have gotten. Not one. Not one. Like, I didn't even really like, you know what I'm saying, Age of Ultron. I did not like Iron Man 3. You know, Thor 2 should have been better. I didn't really like it like I wanted to. Guardians of the Galaxy 2 was a disappointment for me. But that's just me. But I know other people that felt the same way. But you did not feel that self-absorbing hatred, you know, and feeling that, you know, you're not supposed to, you know, be watching that. Like, this is, man, this is going to go down in history as this. And so it's just frustrating because you got like another franchise that it's just so on this high platform that are still enjoyable films and you want to enjoy them. You want to, any DC fan will tell you, you want to be able to enjoy the brand of everything superhero related, because we know as comic book fans, we didn't know that that was something that was a possibility. Like, people that grew up now, you know, you just grew into it. But us coming up with the Justice League, you know, or Super Friends, or like any of the other stuff, you're like, man, this is happening in our generation. We want it all to succeed, you know what I'm saying? And it's like, it's hard because you only have one side that looks like it only is having the fault, or the only side that's having the gospel, you know? And that's not true. It's really not true, unfortunately, but the perception is that it is. Like, within the confounds of these 4 films, they've just gotten so much ridicule. And, you know, I think that now, shoot, Marvel's on its 16th film or 17th, and it took them a while with their phase 1. It really took them a while to hit that real stride, and you can tell certain things that you can kind of pick apart from those different movies, but that's not what the media would jump on. And so that's why I'm saying that from a PR standpoint, there are certain things that they could have stapled in the sand, like this is what's happening. And unfortunately, that just didn't happen. And unfortunately, negativity bump trumps anything that happens from a positive standpoint with anything DCU related, unfortunately. So that was one thing. So that's bad press, what I dissected. I'm actually following through with this pretty well. I talked to you guys about the embargo date. People were kind of just like, when is it gonna? That's another Twitter thing. That's another Twitter thing, by the way. It was actually a whole internet thing. People were like, if the embargo date is not this day, then that movie is gonna fail. It's gonna fail. I can tell you, I don't know how many different websites they were like, if the embargo is like 2 days before, oh, that's bad. Oh, it's bad. Warner Bros. Does not trust this product. Even though now we see Warner Bros. Made a fan screening. He released the critical reactions ahead of time. And on Wednesday, they're going to actually release it. Kind of just what The Force Awakens did. Wonder Woman did. So it's happened before. But, you know, people jumped on that negativity bandwagon. They were just afraid. If you weren't jumping on the negativity bandwagon, you were literally feeling fear. I can even say that in myself. Like, I legit was looking on Twitter like, is this bad? I should have hit up Mbartu. I was like, Mbartu, you know what I'm saying, from Heroic Hollywood. I was like, bruh, do they not trust their product? Is that why they're doing this? You know, and, you know, he didn't answer me, but I was kind of like, I can't believe I even asked myself that question. You know what I'm saying? Like, just wait. Like, you already know you're invested in the movie. You've seen enough of the trailers that you're committed to it. You know, why? You know, it's a part of us as a culture. We look at stuff to fail. We look at stuff to not work. And this is the kicking bucket, unfortunately. As a matter of fact, I've even talked to one of my closest friends and reviewers, and he said to me, oh, so if this fails, their whole universe is done. They might as well just quit. They might as well just stop because, you know, if they get this bad exposure, they're done. And from a media standpoint and from the public perception standpoint, he's right. But at the same time, the other side of that is that doesn't make sense. It doesn't. Even if, you know, I'm speaking, Justice League gets like a 40% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, Metacritic score is like a 50%, and people go and watch the movie, I don't know how many times, it gets $900 million or still $1 billion. You know, is it really a failure? In, you know, the outside surface, you would say yes. But from a fan standpoint, if the fans are satisfied and entertained, then no, it's not true. Why would they not want any more? Or why do they not want another try? It's not a coincidence that if any of you guys are even listening to this right now are going to go see Justice League. That's not a coincidence. You care about the characters. You want the characters to move forward with more stories. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, to reboot everything, that's the taking a step back. We don't want that, you know? But like he said, like, that's what people have in their heads and their hearts, that if Justice League does not succeed or is not, you know, great or good, then the DCU's done. Sad to say, but that's another detractant that will make or break public perception. That's the reality. For me, no, it won't. Whew, man. Last two things I'm going to talk about. These are more sensitive because I feel it's more pettiness, personally. When BVS came out before, you know, Captain America 3 Civil War. And both of those movies went through some interesting little reshoots and tailorings and changes. But even Kevin Feige basically said, look, we're going to tailor Civil War based off of what BVS did. We'll let them have that spot. But then we're going to do the complete opposite in the way that we do stuff. If you look at Civil War and Tony Stark and Captain America and the way they interact and what happens in that movie, and you compare that to BVS with Batman and Superman, Clark Kent, you know, Bruce Wayne, those are exactly the same. Those are exactly the same, but the outcome for Civil War was completely different. It was tailored differently. right? So what happens is, you know, a lot of people will say, and I've heard this everywhere, that Disney or Marvel do not want the DCU to fail. My comment to that, which nobody brings up, is that no, they don't want them to fail because it would do the whole superhero genre in, and you know, people would kind of be like, no. But the reality is, they also don't want them to supersede them. They don't want DCU to supersede what they've created. Because a formula, if you have that formula, you don't want to sit there and change that. It's like if I create an invention, you know, a new Xbox controller, and that Xbox controller is legit. If somebody else makes a similar Xbox controller, and it does its job better, to compete with it, I have to make mine different. I have to make mine better. And that takes more work, money, and dedication and time that I don't have. Look at the phone industry. It's the same exact situation. Unfortunately, you know, some other stuff, we'll go there a different way. But that's the same exact thing that I can tell you, Marvel and Disney do not want to recreate and change their franchise. What has them a little worried and scared is movies like Logan, movies like Deadpool, that are succeeding, but changing the scope of how these movies are done. If New Mutants, you know, succeeds, which I would be surprised if it does. If it does, that will change how Marvel perceives some of their new characters coming forward. I can just tell you that. If this movie succeeds, if Aquaman succeeds, it will change how they have to tailor their demographics of people, because that's the same as that thing what DC has to do. DC knows it's going to have to lighten its tone, it's going to have to change, you know, and simplify a lot more of the character progression and the dialogue to not make it a movie that people have to think about or wonder about or feel artistic about to reach the public demographic. They have to tailor the movie to do that. Marvel doesn't want to do that. I can promise you that. So if you tell me, you know, they want DC to succeed to a fault, they don't want DC, you know, to supersede them. So that's a cop-out. That's just my personal opinion on that. And the reason why I bring this up is that, you know, we know that Star Wars is all December. December is dedicated to Star Wars. Thor Ragnarok is a success. Even though the reviewers have said their problems about it, you don't hear it because the Rotten Tomatoes shows it at like a 92% rating. So it doesn't matter, you know, even if the critics were like, yeah, this movie's dumb, or some people were like, nah, this, you know, the story was flat. It was flat, you know. It's not being publicized because that's not what's hip, you know, in the sense of public perception. Like, public perception is like, it's a Marvel movie. It's gonna be dope. Like, it's meant to be funny. It's meant to be fun, you know. But DC movies, like, they got it wrong. They get everything wrong. So it's like what's happening is with Thor, you know, they got a lot going for it. But I feel like everybody has already seen Thor, so I don't think that's going to affect the box office for Justice League. But what will affect it, unfortunately, is Punisher is coming out the same exact day. And a lot of people say, well, you know, there are people out there that will binge watch Punisher and watch Justice League. But some people will not. And those people that would normally go out on a Friday night or a Saturday night or a Thursday night, if they have an opportunity of binge watching Punisher, you can bet your tail they will do that over looking at a movie that, in a lot of people's perspective, could be mediocre, or a franchise that, in their public perception, has failed. So no matter what, that directly affects their revenue. That directly affects the perception of the movie, because if two things happen, if on Wednesday, you know, they get great ratings, you know, that'll help the movie. If they get bad ratings, that'll affect the movie. If they get those two things and they get it good, they get good ratings, and then on Thursday or Friday, their turnout is like less than 100 million, that will change the public perception of what people think about. In case in point, Blade Runner 2049 is one of the best movies this year, but it got one of the lowest revenues in the movie, and it has a bad taste on it. It has such a bad taste on it because it's like, this is a good movie, why didn't you watch it? So that'll definitely affect it, versus something like Thor that got now at like 600 million or close to it. So it's like you got Punisher coming out. That's going to affect the revenue scale for Justice League, no matter which way you try to spin it. For me personally, and that was petty to me. That's was petty because I want to see the Punisher. You know what I'm saying? I really want to see the Punisher. So I feel like that was a petty move, and that's happened. That's legit happened. Like even like some of the trailers that have released recently. I think one. I would say it'd be Black Panther during, you know, a sports event, another Black Panther trailer during another sports event, Thor during another sports event. And it's like it targets a certain demographic. And I think that is smart and cunning and innovative from a PR and a press standpoint. But DC did not capitalize on it, and it affects DC, unfortunately. So I think that I've pretty much gone over everything. The last thing I'll talk about, I can't believe I've been talking this long, is the reactions. What people have been saying about Justice League so far. People have been saying that the team works together great. They cinematically look great. But they're saying that the villain is horrid. They're saying that, well, not horrid. They said it doesn't work. They're saying that the story is flat. Is thinned out. We already know that, you know, the movie has been cut to 2 hours, so they definitely had to cut and reshoot a lot of different things from a pacing and progressional standpoint. They want this to just be a good superhero popcorn movie. They don't want this to be a masterpiece. It's evident they don't want that to be. I think it could have been, but they didn't want that to be. I'm okay with that. I can live with that. I'm not that jaded about that. But people are saying this, right? And so they're saying, like, you know, the CG is not good. It's not as good as it really should be. When I looked at Thor Ragnarok, I thought that man, some of those scenes, the CG was lit. But then there are moments in Thor Ragnarok that the CG is not necessarily all that good. And that's throughout any of these superhero movies, not just DCU, but Marvel or Fox. There are moments where the CG is just not where it needs to be. So why is it something that is being cried over in a reaction, right? Same thing for the villains. In DCU and Marvel, there has not been any good villains. When I think about the Logan movie didn't even have a villain, really. That was a good villain, that's something that you remember, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, that was still a great movie, but it didn't have even a villain. Because it's not perceived as a comic book movie, it's perceived as a film. So that's where you kind of cross this interesting line. It's like, for me, you know, the best MCU villains are Loki and the Vulture. Vulture to me is better than Loki. And Hela would be an interesting tie with that. But, you know, I don't want to spoil anything with Thor Ragnarok, but we'll see. That's a to be continued. They failed for me with Ultron. You got James Spader as Ultron, he didn't get it, you know what I'm saying? You know, and I think Iron Man 1 had a really decent villain, but all the rest, they weren't really good villains. And then when you think about like DCU, like besides General Zod, they have a lot of weak villains too. So it's like, why are we talking about the merits of a strong or weak villain? You know, like that's not something. I mean, I guess from a critic standpoint, and that's fine, but you as people shouldn't perceive the movie and its merits based on the villains or the CG, because that's a commonality with all these films. But the problem is that not that everybody wants to be a critic, but internally they do. They look at this like, yeah, this is a really bad villain. But when I think about this movie, that villain was okay compared to this one, you know? And it shouldn't be like that. We should just enjoy the movie. We should enjoy the movie, but people are going to look at these reactions as the gospel again. Because negativity is something that, from a perceptional standpoint, is a lot more easily digestible and something that could be good. So, yeah. Make or breaks. I think that, personally, after everything that I've even said, it's a miracle, one, that this movie is even being made. Not just from my childhood, but everything that this franchise has gone through. I can't believe this movie still got made. I'm glad that it's coming out soon. I'm glad that, you know, they allow the press to be able to put out their reactions early without putting out the reviews to spoil everything. I'm glad that we got a fan screening the Monday of, which shows weight and value of the fan base as much as, like, you know, like hope, you know, that this will actually be perceived well. Glad that, you know, the official last press day is on Tuesday, and then they're gonna have the releasing of the reviews on Wednesday morning. I'm glad that the characters work from the public press perception. What I'm worried about, again, is these different things of negativity sales and the pitch of negativity sales, where it's like you got people giving positive reactions about the movie. All in all, everybody said something good about the movie. But people are so worried or try to jump on the negativity bandwagon that it exhausts these, you know, critics, because it exhausts me. You know, these critics are being literally attacked before they even put out the number or their Rotten Tomatoes score, you know, and it's like, that is not going to make them want to put out, you know, a positive review about a movie, because they're already going to be internally jaded. There's no way. So those are things that I do worry about. I do worry about, you know, that Wednesday and how people feel after having to wait so long, and then like, man, this was a tiring thing. Here we go all over again, you know, with this DC film. I am a little worried, personally, that the story should have been something different, and that they changed it. I'm worried about things that they removed. It's rumored that they removed Iris West. It's rumored they removed Lex Luthor, even though Lex Luthor in the Ultimate Cut was the person that communicated with Steppenwolf within the confines of the ship. I'm worried that they're not going to show like a Martian Manhunter or Green Lantern. I'm worried that they won't show Superman in a black suit. But those are cautious worries for me, optimistically, but those are also there. And I'm just telling you that these are things that are probably people are also perceiving as well in their personal perspective about the movie before it comes out. Again, I haven't seen the movie. I'm just telling you about the foundations of how everything has happened at this point. I am worried that even if I like this movie, other people are going to tell me I'm dumb for liking it. I can say that Wonder Woman, when I said that I like Wonder Woman, everybody was like, I like Wonder Woman too. You're not crazy for liking Wonder Woman. You know? So those are things that I personally worry about, and I know that some of you guys are worried as well. I think that what we need to do, personally, is to see where this goes. For the good or bad, if you're watching this now, I haven't seen the movie, but if you've already seen the movie and you're watching my video now, you know, let me your comments. Everything that I've kind of dissected, if you would have seen this video beforehand, would it have eased your heart and mind to just be like, you know what? Let's just see where this goes. This could be either way. This could be an enjoyable time, or just something that could have let me down, or this could have been something that, you know, I can't wait to see what's going to happen next kind of situation. We'll see. So I think that that is something that we need to kind of keep an optimistic standpoint, and that's what I'm going to maintain. But I'm doing this video honestly for you guys because I don't think that all these different things have been dissected in one specific video, and I've dedicated myself to writing these things out and trying to give you guys an adequate, unbiased perspective on how all this thing has worked out or not worked out, and what's going to make or break Justice League. Keep it locked. JVS, we ain't gonna stop. I'll talk to you guys soon. Look forward to my social media reaction to it on Monday night, and look forward to my review for the movie on Wednesday. Keep it locked. JVS, we ain't gonna stop. Peace, guys. Oh my gosh.